Have you ever wondered why Family Guy has been running for over 2 decades and somehow still manages to surprise us with its bizarre storylines and character developments? Tonight we're diving deep into the twisted wonderland that is Family Guy lore, exploring every hidden detail, forgotten plotline, and mind-bending continuity that makes this animated universe so captivating. So grab your favorite blanket, settle in, and let's explore the chaotic genius of Seth MacFarlane's creation in the most relaxing way possible. Family Guy first premiered in 1999, introducing us to the Griffin family in the fictional town of Quahog, Rhode Island. But what makes this show truly fascinating isn't just its crude humor or celebrity parodies. It's the intricate web of backstories, recurring characters, and interconnected plotlines that have evolved over more than 20 seasons. The show has created an entire universe with its own rules, physics, and logic that somehow makes perfect sense within its own context. Let's start with the patriarch of the family, Peter Griffin. On the surface, he appears to be just another bumbling cartoon dad, but his character has layers upon layers of complexity that have been revealed over the years. Peter works at the Pawtucket Patriot Brewery, a job he's held for most of the series despite his obvious incompetence. The brewery itself has become a character in the show, with its own history and significance to the town of Quahog. We've learned that the brewery was founded by Francis Griffin, Peter's father, who had a complicated relationship with his son that influenced much of Peter's behavior and worldview. Peter's ancestry is surprisingly diverse and complex. Throughout the series, we've discovered that he has Irish, German, and even extraterrestrial lineage. His Irish heritage connects him to Mickey McFinnigan, a character who represents Peter's more aggressive and confrontational side. The German connection links him to Franz Gutentag, revealing Peter's capacity for both creativity and destruction. These ancestral connections aren't just throwaway gags, but actually inform Peter's personality and explain some of his more extreme behaviors. The Griffin house itself is a character with its own mysteries and secrets. Located at 31 Spooner Street, the house has witnessed countless bizarre events and transformations. The basement has served as everything from a speakeasy during Prohibition flashbacks to a torture chamber in various episodes. The house's layout seems to change depending on the needs of each episode, but certain elements remain consistent, creating a sense of familiarity and comfort for longtime viewers. Lois Griffin brings her own rich backstory to the family dynamic. Born into the wealthy Pewterschmidt family, she gave up a life of luxury to marry Peter, a decision that continues to baffle her parents throughout the series. Her musical talents, particularly her piano skills, have been a recurring element that adds depth to her character. Lois has also demonstrated surprising combat skills and strategic thinking, suggesting a more complex personality beneath her patient housewife exterior. The Pewterschmidt family fortune adds another layer to the show's mythology. Francis Pewterschmidt's wealth comes from various questionable business ventures, including connections to organized crime and political corruption. This background creates interesting dynamics when the Griffin family interacts with Lois's relatives, often highlighting the contrast between Peter's working-class sensibilities and the upper-class world Lois left behind. Meg Griffin represents one of the most interesting character developments in the series. Initially portrayed as a typical teenage daughter, Meg has evolved into something much more complex. Her treatment by the family serves multiple narrative purposes, from comic relief to social commentary. But beneath the surface abuse lies a character with remarkable resilience and hidden depths. Meg has demonstrated extraordinary survival skills, leadership abilities, and even psychopathic tendencies that suggest she may be the most dangerous member of the Griffin family. The show has explored Meg's potential futures in various episodes, showing her as everything from a successful businesswoman to a hardened criminal. These glimpses into alternate timelines reveal that Meg's current situation may be holding back someone with tremendous potential for both good and evil. Her relationship with her family, particularly her father, reflects broader themes about family dynamics and the impact of emotional abuse on personal development. Chris Griffin embodies the innocent chaos that runs through the Griffin family DNA. His artistic talents and creative imagination often serve as windows into the show's more surreal elements. Chris's drawings and stories frequently predict or parallel the main plot lines, suggesting he may have some form of prescient abilities. His relationship with his imaginary friend and various supernatural encounters hint at a deeper connection to the mystical elements that occasionally surface in the show. The youngest Griffin, Stewie, presents perhaps the most complex character in the entire series. His intelligence fluctuates dramatically depending on the needs of each episode, but his core personality remains consistently fascinating. Stewie's relationship with time travel has become central to the show's mythology, allowing for exploration of alternate timelines and potential futures. His scientific genius enables him to create impossible inventions that somehow function within the show's universe. Stewie's sexuality has been handled with surprising nuance throughout the series. Rather than making definitive statements, the show has allowed his character to evolve naturally, exploring themes of identity and self-discovery in ways that feel authentic despite the absurd context. His relationships with other characters, particularly Brian and Chris, reveal different aspects of his personality and emotional development. Brian Griffin occupies a unique position as both pet and family member. His intellectual pretensions and political opinions often serve as a voice of reason within the chaotic Griffin household, though his own flaws and hypocrisies are regularly exposed. Brian's writing career provides commentary on artistic ambition and the struggle for creative success. His various romantic relationships and personal failures make him one of the most relatable characters. Despite being a talking dog, the show has explored Brian's mortality in ways that other animated series rarely attempt. His near-death experiences and actual temporary death created genuine emotional moments that demonstrated the show's capacity for sincere storytelling alongside its trademark irreverence. Brian's relationship with alcohol and his struggles with depression add layers of complexity that elevate him beyond simple comic relief. Quahog itself functions as more than just a setting for the Griffin family's adventures. The town has its own history, politics, and culture that influence the stories and characters. The Drunken Clam serves as Peter's primary social hub, where he interacts with his core group of friends. These friendships have evolved over the years, revealing backstories and dynamics that enrich the overall narrative. Cleveland Brown's departure and subsequent return to the show created interesting continuity questions and opportunities for character development. His friendship with Peter predates the series and provides stability in Peter's otherwise chaotic social life. Joe Swanson's paralysis and his career as a police officer create dramatic tension and opportunities for both humor and genuine emotion. Glenn Quagmire represents the show's most controversial character, whose extreme behavior serves as commentary on toxic masculinity and social boundaries. The recurring villains and antagonists in Family Guy create ongoing narrative threads that connect episodes across seasons. Ernie the Giant Chicken represents Peter's capacity for holding grudges and his tendency toward extreme responses to minor slights. Their elaborate fight sequences have become legendary within the show's mythology, each one topping the previous encounter in terms of scope and destruction. The evil monkey in Chris's closet evolved from a simple sight gag into a character with his own motivations and backstory. The resolution of his conflict with Chris demonstrated the show's ability to address long-running mysteries while maintaining its comedic sensibilities. These types of character arcs show that even the most absurd elements of the show can be given meaningful context and resolution. Death himself has appeared multiple times throughout the series, establishing a mythology around mortality and the afterlife within the Family Guy universe. His interactions with the Griffin family suggest they occupy a special place in the cosmic order, perhaps explaining their ability to survive increasingly dangerous and absurd situations. The show's handling of religious and spiritual themes walks a careful line between satire and genuine exploration of existential questions. The multiverse concept has become increasingly important to Family Guy's storytelling approach. Episodes featuring alternate versions of the characters allow for exploration of different possibilities and character development paths. These alternate realities often reveal core truths about the main characters by showing how they might behave under different circumstances. The Road 2 episodes featuring Stewie and Brian's adventures in different locations showcase the show's ability to parody various genres while advancing character relationships. These episodes often feature higher production values and more sophisticated storytelling techniques, demonstrating the creative team's range and ambition. The locations themselves become characters, each presenting unique challenges and opportunities for character growth. Celebrity encounters within the show create a meta-commentary on fame and popular culture. Rather than simple cameo appearances, these interactions often reveal aspects of the Griffin family's personalities and values. The show's willingness to satirize celebrities, while also humanizing them, creates complex relationships between fiction and reality. The time travel elements introduced through Stewie's inventions have allowed the show to explore historical periods and potential futures. These temporal adventures often carry surprising emotional weight, as characters confront the consequences of their actions across different time periods. The rules governing time travel within the show's universe remain deliberately vague, allowing for maximum storytelling flexibility. Family Guy's handling of controversial topics demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of comedy's role in social commentary. By pushing boundaries and challenging taboos, the show creates opportunities for genuine discussion about difficult subjects. The characters' reactions to these situations often reveal their core values and moral frameworks, adding depth to what might otherwise be simple shock humor. The show's relationship with its own continuity creates interesting meta-textual layers. Episodes that acknowledge previous events or reference long-running jokes demonstrate respect for longtime viewers while remaining accessible to newcomers. This balance between continuity and accessibility requires careful attention to storytelling craft that often goes unnoticed. The musical elements throughout Family Guy serve multiple narrative functions beyond simple entertainment. Conway Twitty appearances became running gags that tested viewer patience while commenting on pacing and expectations. The original songs created for the show often advance character development or provide emotional release during particularly intense storylines. The animation style itself has evolved significantly since the show's debut, reflecting both technological advances and changing aesthetic preferences. The increased detail and smoother movement in recent seasons create different possibilities for visual storytelling and character expression. These improvements allow for more subtle emotional moments and complex sight gags. The show's international episodes and cultural references demonstrate awareness of global perspectives while maintaining its distinctly American viewpoint. These cultural explorations often reveal the characters' prejudices and assumptions, creating opportunities for growth and understanding. The research and attention to detail in these episodes shows respect for the cultures being portrayed, even when satirizing them. As we've journeyed through the vast landscape of Family Guy lore, we've discovered that beneath its irreverent surface lies a surprisingly sophisticated storytelling universe. The show's longevity stems not just from its ability to shock and entertain, but from its commitment to character development and narrative complexity. Each episode adds new layers to this rich tapestry, creating connections and possibilities that keep viewers engaged across decades of viewing. The Griffin family's adventures continue to evolve, promising new mysteries and revelations for future exploration. Whether you're a longtime fan or a curious newcomer, there's always something new to discover in the wonderfully chaotic world of Family Guy. Sweet dreams, and remember that in Quahog, anything is possible. You know that feeling when you're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone, and suddenly you realize you've been watching Family Guy clips for 3 hours straight? Tonight, we're diving deep into the twisted, hilarious, and surprisingly complex world of Family Griffin and his dysfunctional Rhode Island family. So grab your favorite blanket, dim those lights, and let me take you on a journey through decades of animated chaos that somehow became one of television's most enduring franchises. Picture this. It's 1999, and a young animator named Seth MacFarlane is sitting in his apartment, probably eating cereal for dinner, when he creates what would become a cultural phenomenon. But here's the thing most people don't realize about Family Guy. Beneath all the cutaway gags, pop culture references, and Stewie's diabolical schemes lies a surprisingly intricate web of character development, running storylines, and hidden details that span over 2 decades. Let's start with the Griffin family themselves, because honestly, they're way more complex than people give them credit for. Peter Griffin isn't just a bumbling dad who works at a brewery. He's actually a fascinating study in arrested development. Throughout the series, we've learned that his childlike behavior stems from a complicated relationship with his father, Francis Griffin, a strict Irish Catholic who never showed Peter affection. This explains so much about why Peter desperately seeks approval while simultaneously rebelling against authority figures. But here's where it gets interesting. Peter's job at the Pawtucket Brewery isn't just random, it's actually owned by Carter Pewterschmidt, his father-in-law, which creates this whole dynamic where Peter is constantly trying to prove himself to a man who sees him as completely inadequate. The brewery itself has become this recurring location where some of the show's most memorable moments happen, from Peter's various workplace shenanigans to the time he discovered the brewery was basically stealing Budweiser's recipe. Now let's talk about Lois, because she's probably the most underappreciated character in the entire series. On the surface, she's the long-suffering wife who puts up with Peter's antics. But dig deeper, and you'll find a former wild child from a wealthy family who gave up everything for love. Lois comes from money, serious money, and she chose to live in a modest house in Quahog with a man her parents despise. Her maiden name, Pewterschmidt, carries weight in their social circle, but she rejected that lifestyle. The fascinating thing about Lois is how the show gradually reveals her past. She was this rebellious rich girl who dated musicians, experimented with different lifestyles, and had a completely different personality before settling down. Sometimes that old Lois emerges, usually when she's pushed too far, and those episodes are absolutely brilliant because they show the complexity beneath her patient exterior. Chris Griffin represents something really interesting in the show's evolution. Initially, he was just the awkward teenage son, but over time, the writers developed him into this surprisingly deep character dealing with typical teenage issues, amplified by his family's dysfunction. His relationship with his father is particularly touching because Peter, despite his flaws, genuinely tries to connect with Chris, even though he has no idea how to be a proper role model. What makes Chris compelling is how he's actually the most emotionally intelligent member of the family. He sees through his parents' problems, understands his sister's struggles, and often serves as the voice of reason, even though he's still figuring out his own identity. His various crushes, friendships, and coming-of-age moments provide some of the show's most genuine emotional beats. Meg Griffin. Oh, poor Meg. She's become this cultural touchstone for teenage awkwardness. But there's something genuinely tragic about her character that goes beyond the surface-level jokes. The constant rejection and abuse she faces from her family would destroy most people, but Meg keeps trying. She keeps hoping for acceptance, keeps pursuing her dreams, keeps believing that maybe tomorrow will be different. The really dark aspect of Meg's story is how the family uses her as their collective punching bag to avoid dealing with their own problems. When Peter and Lois are having marriage troubles, they unite in mocking Meg. When Chris feels insecure, he puts down Meg. It's this twisted family dynamic where she serves as the lightning rod for everyone else's dysfunction. But here's what's brilliant about the show's treatment of Meg. Occasionally, they give her episodes where she fights back or finds genuine happiness, and those moments hit differently because we've watched her suffer for so long. When she stands up to her family or finds someone who appreciates her, it feels earned in a way that's surprisingly powerful for a comedy show. Then there's Stewie, the baby genius with unclear sexual orientation and a British accent that nobody questions. Stewie's character has gone through the most dramatic evolution of anyone in the show. He started as this one-note villain baby trying to kill his mother and take over the world, but gradually became this complex character dealing with identity issues, family dynamics, and his relationship with Brian. The Stewie-Brian friendship is honestly the heart of the entire series. These two characters, despite their obvious differences, have this incredible bond built on mutual respect and genuine affection. Their adventures together, from time travel to road trips, provide some of the show's best storytelling because the writers can explore deeper themes through their relationship. What's fascinating about Stewie is how his intelligence serves as both a blessing and a curse. He can build time machines and understand complex scientific concepts, but he's, quote, still emotionally a child dealing with typical childhood fears and insecurities. His relationship with his mother is particularly complex because while he originally wanted to kill her, he gradually develops this deep love for Lois that he struggles to express. Brian Griffin deserves his own deep dive because he's arguably the show's most controversial character. He's this liberal intellectual dog who writes novels nobody reads, drinks martinis, and constantly preaches about social issues while being fundamentally flawed himself. Brian represents this specific type of person we all know, the friend who talks a good game about being progressive and enlightened, but whose actions don't always match their rhetoric. The genius of Brian's character is how the show gradually reveals his hypocrisy without completely destroying his likability. He's pretentious, he's selfish, he's often wrong about things he claims to understand, but he's also capable of genuine growth and moments of real insight. His romantic relationships throughout the series serve as this ongoing commentary on his character flaws and his struggle to become a better person. One of the most interesting aspects of Family Guy lore is how the show handles continuity. On the surface, it seems like a show where anything can happen and nothing really matters. But if you pay attention, there's actually a surprising amount of consistency in character development and running storylines. The writers remember details from episodes that aired years ago and will call back to them in unexpected ways. Take the ongoing rivalry between Peter and the giant chicken, Ernie. What started as a throwaway gag about expired coupons evolved into this epic saga spanning multiple episodes and featuring increasingly elaborate fight sequences. These battles have become legendary among fans because they represent the show's commitment to taking absurd premises to their logical extreme. The show's relationship with death is particularly fascinating. Characters die and come back, timelines get altered, and reality bends in ways that should break the show's internal logic. But somehow, it all works because the emotional core remains consistent. When major characters like Brian temporarily died, the fan reaction was intense because despite all the show's surreal elements, viewers had formed genuine attachments to these characters. Let's talk about Quahog itself, because the town is almost a character in its own right. This fictional Rhode Island community is populated by an incredible cast of recurring characters who each bring their own flavor to the show's universe. There's Joe Swanson, the paralyzed police officer whose determination and positive attitude contrast sharply with his neighbor's various dysfunctions. Cleveland Brown, before he got his own spin-off, represented this calm, reasonable voice in the chaos of Quahog. His friendship with Peter, despite Peter's often thoughtless behavior, showed this theme that runs throughout the series about how genuine friendships can survive even the most ridiculous circumstances. Glenn Quagmire is probably the most controversial neighbor because he's simultaneously hilarious and deeply disturbing. His character serves as this extreme example of toxic masculinity taken to absurd lengths, but the show occasionally gives him moments of vulnerability that suggest there's more to him than just his predatory behavior. The local businesses in Quahog each have their own personalities too. The Drunken Clam isn't just a bar where the guys hang out. It's this working-class sanctuary where they can escape their domestic responsibilities and bond over beer and television. Jerome, the bartender, represents this stable, wise presence who's seen everything and judges nothing. One of the most underappreciated aspects of Family Guy lore is how it handles social commentary. Yes, the show is often criticized for pushing boundaries, but if you look closely, there's actually a consistent moral framework underlying most episodes. The show frequently punishes characters for their bad behavior, even if those consequences don't carry over to future episodes. Peter's schemes usually backfire spectacularly, teaching him lessons he immediately forgets. Stewie's attempts at manipulation often result in him learning something about empathy or human connection. Brian's pretensions are regularly deflated by reality. The show has this way of exploring serious topics through absurd scenarios that somehow makes the underlying messages more palatable. The cutaway gags, which are probably the show's most recognizable feature, serve a purpose beyond just getting laughs. They provide breathing room in episodes, allow for pop culture commentary, and give the writers freedom to explore ideas that wouldn't fit into the main storyline. Some of these gags have become so iconic that they've entered the broader cultural conversation. What's really impressive about Family Guy's longevity is how it's managed to stay relevant across multiple decades of changing cultural landscape. The show started in the late 90s, survived cancellation, came back stronger than ever, and continues to find new audiences while maintaining its core identity. That takes real skill from the writers, voice actors, and animators who bring this world to life. The voice acting, especially, deserves recognition because Seth MacFarlane voices multiple main characters while maintaining distinct personalities for each one. Peter's Rhode Island accent, Stewie's British sophistication, Brian's intellectual pretensions, roulette. Each voice tells you everything you need to know about the character before they even start talking. As we've journeyed through this animated universe tonight, what emerges is a picture of a show that's far more thoughtful and complex than its reputation might suggest. Family Guy works because beneath all the chaos and controversy, it's fundamentally about family. Messy, complicated, dysfunctional family, but family nonetheless. The Griffins may be terrible to each other most of the time, but when it really matters, they come together. Peter and Lois may have a dysfunctional marriage, but there are moments of genuine love and connection. The kids may be weird and damaged, but they're finding their way through adolescence and childhood as best they can. Maybe that's why Family Guy has endured for so long, and why we keep coming back to Quahog night after night. In a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable, there's something comforting about a fictional family that's even more messed up than we are, but somehow keeps going anyway. So as you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that somewhere in Rhode Island, Peter Griffin is probably doing something incredibly stupid, Lois is wondering how her life got to this point, and Stewie is plotting world domination while secretly just wanting someone to read him a bedtime story. Sweet dreams, and thanks for joining me in the wonderfully weird world of Family Guy. What if I told you that the seemingly random chaos of Family Guy actually contains one of the most intricate and bizarre mythologies in television history? Tonight, we're diving deep into the strange, interconnected world of Quahog, where time travel, multiverse theory, and ancient conspiracies all exist within what most people think is just a simple comedy show. So grab your favorite blanket, dim the lights, and let me guide you through the surprisingly complex lore of Family Guy that will have your mind wandering as you drift off to sleep. You know that feeling when you're watching Family Guy and suddenly realize that what seemed like a throwaway gag from Season 3 somehow connects to a major plot point in Season 15? That's not an accident. The writers have been weaving an elaborate tapestry of continuity that most viewers never even notice. But once you start paying attention, you'll see that every cutaway gag, every random flashback, and every seemingly nonsensical moment is actually part of a much larger story. Let's start with something that might surprise you. Peter Griffin isn't just a bumbling father figure. He's actually descended from a long line of historically significant troublemakers. We've seen his ancestors throughout various time periods, and there's a pattern that emerges. The Griffin bloodline has been consistently disrupting major historical events for centuries. From medieval times to the Wild West, from the Revolutionary War to World War II, there's always been a Griffin somewhere causing chaos at pivotal moments in history. But here's where it gets really interesting. These aren't just random coincidences or simple gags for historical episodes. The show has established that the Griffin family exists in a temporal loop where their actions in the past directly influence their present circumstances. Remember when Peter traveled back in time and accidentally prevented the American Revolution? The ripple effects of that single action created an entirely different timeline where the Griffins lived under British rule. This suggests that the Griffin family exists as a kind of temporal anchor point, a family whose actions echo across time itself. Now let's talk about Stewie, because his story is far more complex than most people realize. Yes, he's a baby with advanced intelligence and a time machine, but the implications go much deeper. Stewie represents something unprecedented in human evolution. His intelligence isn't just advanced for a baby, it's advanced for humanity as a whole. He's essentially a post-human being trapped in an infant's body, which explains his constant frustration with the limitations of his physical form. The time machine isn't just a convenient plot device either. Stewie's relationship with time travel reveals something profound about the nature of destiny in the Family Guy universe. Every time he attempts to change major events, the universe seems to course-correct itself. This suggests that certain events are fixed points in time, and the Griffin family's role in history is one of those unchangeable constants. Stewie's time machine becomes less of a tool for changing the past and more of a window for understanding the predetermined nature of his family's fate. But Stewie's sexuality and his relationship with Brian opens up another layer of the mythology. Their adventures together through time and space aren't just buddy comedy escapades. They represent the classic pairing of intellect and wisdom. youth and experience, ambition and acceptance. Stewie's gradual acceptance of his own identity parallels his growing understanding of his place in the cosmic order of things. Brian, meanwhile, serves as the show's philosophical anchor. He's not just a talking dog with human characteristics. He represents the voice of reason in a world that has abandoned logic entirely. His alcoholism, his failed writing career, his complicated romantic relationships, they all serve a purpose. In the larger narrative, Brian is essentially the Greek chorus of Family Guy, commenting on the absurdity around him while being equally absurd himself. The dog's intellectual pretensions aren't character flaws. They're survival mechanisms. In a universe where chaos reigns supreme and logical consequences rarely apply, Brian maintains his sanity by clinging to intellectual pursuits and artistic ambitions. His constant failures in these areas aren't meant to mock intellectualism. They're meant to show how difficult it is to maintain rational thought in an irrational world. And then there's the question of why Brian can talk in the first place. The show has never provided a definitive explanation, but the evidence suggests something far more significant than a simple cartoon convention. Brian's intelligence and speech patterns indicate that he might be the result of some kind of experiment or evolutionary leap. His relationship with the Griffin family isn't coincidental, it's symbiotic. They need his rationality to ground their chaos, and he needs their acceptance to validate his existence. Let's shift our focus to the town of Quahog itself, because the setting is just as important as the characters. Quahog, Rhode Island, is presented as a typical American town, but it's actually a nexus point for supernatural and extraordinary events. Think about how many bizarre incidents occur in this one small town. Alien invasions, time travelers, parallel dimensions, ancient curses, superhero battles, the list goes on and on. This isn't just because it's a cartoon where anything can happen. Quahog exists as a kind of soft spot in reality where the normal rules don't apply. The town's history is filled with references to occult practices, mysterious disappearances, and unexplained phenomena. The founding families of Quahog weren't just ordinary settlers. They were practitioners of strange rituals and keepers of ancient secrets. The Pewterschmidt family, Lois's relatives, play a crucial role in this hidden history. They're not just wealthy socialites with old money. They're descendants of a secret society that has been manipulating events from behind the scenes for generations. Francis Pewterschmidt's vast fortune isn't just the result of good investments and business acumen. It's built on knowledge of future events and manipulation of historical outcomes. This explains why Lois, despite coming from such a refined background, chose to marry someone like Peter. It wasn't just rebellion against her upbringing. She was fulfilling her role in a predetermined pattern that her family has been orchestrating for decades. The Pewterschmidts needed the chaos that the Griffin bloodline represents, and the Griffins needed the resources and connections that the Pewterschmidts provide. Meg's place in this family dynamic is particularly tragic when you understand the deeper mythology. She's not just the family scapegoat because she's awkward and unpopular. She represents the potential for breaking the cycle that has trapped both family lines for generations. Her outsider status, her rejection by both families, her struggle to find her own identity, these all position her as the one Griffin who might escape the predetermined pattern. But the universe actively works against her attempts at independence. Every time Meg tries to establish her own path, circumstances conspire to pull her back into the family dysfunction. This isn't just bad luck or poor writing. It's the cosmic forces that govern the Griffin family mythology asserting themselves to maintain the status quo. Chris, on the other hand, represents pure potential corrupted by circumstance. His artistic talents and creative intelligence could have developed into something extraordinary, but the family environment and the town's supernatural influence stunts his growth. He's essentially a Griffin who could have transcended the family pattern if he'd been raised elsewhere, but Quahog's reality-warping properties keep him locked in adolescent stagnation. The show's treatment of death and resurrection reveals another crucial aspect of the mythology. Characters die and return to life with surprising frequency. But this isn't just cartoon physics at work. The Griffin family exists in a universe where death isn't permanent, because their roles in the cosmic order are too important to leave vacant for long. When Brian died and was replaced by Vinny, the universe itself seemed to reject this change. The overwhelming fan reaction wasn't just audience preference. It was the collective unconscious recognizing that something fundamental had been disrupted. Brian's eventual return wasn't just fan service. It was the universe course-correcting itself to maintain the proper balance of forces. This concept of cosmic balance extends to all the characters' relationships and conflicts. Peter's constant feuds with the giant chicken, Ernie, aren't just elaborate fight sequences for comedic effect. They represent the eternal struggle between order and chaos, with Peter as the agent of disruption and the chicken as the force trying to restore stability. Their battles are essentially cosmic events disguised as slapstick comedy. The show's frequent breaks into musical numbers serve a similar purpose. These aren't just entertainment value or parody of other shows. Music in the Family Guy universe functions as a kind of reality-altering force. When characters break into song, they're tapping into a fundamental frequency that shapes the nature of their reality. The most elaborate musical sequences often precede or follow major shifts in the character's circumstances or relationships. Cleveland's departure and return to the show illustrates this principle perfectly. His move to Virginia wasn't just a setup for a spin-off series. Cleveland represents stability and voice of reason within Peter's friend group. His absence created an imbalance that affected the entire dynamic of the show. When he returned, bringing with him experiences and perspectives from his time away, he brought new harmony to the group's chemistry. The relationship between Family Guy and its sister shows, American Dad and The Cleveland Show, reveals another layer of the mythology. These aren't separate universes. They're parallel dimensions within the same cosmic framework. The occasional crossovers and references between shows aren't just promotional gimmicks. They're glimpses into the interconnected nature of this animated reality. Stan Smith's CIA connections and Roger's alien origins in American Dad represent the government and extraterrestrial aspects of this shared universe. Cleveland's experiences in Virginia and his eventual return tie together the domestic and community elements. All three shows explore different facets of the same underlying themes about family, identity, and the struggle to maintain humanity in an increasingly absurd world. The show's relationship with pop culture goes beyond simple parody and reference. Family Guy exists in a universe where fictional characters and real people coexist and interact regularly. This isn't just celebrity cameos or movie references. It's evidence that the boundaries between reality and fiction are fluid in this cosmology. The characters' frequent interactions with celebrities and fictional characters suggest that they exist at the intersection point between the real world and the world of entertainment. This explains why the show can seamlessly blend references to classic literature, contemporary movies, historical figures, and original characters, all within the same episode. The Griffin family doesn't just live in a world influenced by pop culture. They live in a world where pop culture and reality merge and separate according to narrative needs. The cutaway gags serve a crucial function in this mythology. They're not just random jokes or digressions from the main plot. Each cutaway represents a glimpse into an alternate timeline or parallel dimension where things played out differently. When Peter says something reminds him of the time he did something completely unrelated, he's not just making a non sequitur. He's accessing memories from his alternate dimensional selves. This interpretation explains why the cutaway gags often feature the characters in completely different historical periods, professions, or circumstances. These aren't fantasies or exaggerations. They're actual experiences from versions of themselves in parallel realities. The Griffin family's consciousness apparently extends across multiple dimensions, giving them access to memories and experiences from their alternate selves. The show's frequent references to its own production, fourth wall breaks, and meta-commentary aren't just postmodern humor techniques. They represent moments when the characters become aware of their fictional nature and their role in entertaining an audience. These moments of self-awareness suggest that the characters exist simultaneously as fictional constructs and as conscious beings aware of their constructed reality. This dual existence explains many of the show's apparent inconsistencies and contradictions. The characters can simultaneously be unaware cartoon figures following script directions and self-aware beings commenting on their own fictional status. They exist in a state of quantum superposition between fiction and reality, which allows them to function as both entertainment and commentary on entertainment itself. As we near the end of our journey through Family Guy's hidden mythology, it's worth considering what all of this complexity and interconnectedness means for us as viewers. The show operates on multiple levels simultaneously, providing surface-level entertainment while encoding deeper messages about family, society, and the nature of reality itself. The chaos and absurdity that define the Griffin family's existence mirror our own struggles to find meaning and connection in an increasingly chaotic world. The enduring popularity of Family Guy, despite its controversial content and seemingly random humor, suggests that audiences respond to something deeper than just the surface-level comedy. We're drawn to the Griffin family because they represent an exaggerated version of our own family dynamics, our own struggles with identity and belonging, our own attempts to maintain relationships in the face of constant absurdity. So as you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that behind all the crude humor and outrageous situations, Family Guy tells a story about the persistence of family bonds across time and space, the power of love to overcome chaos, and the possibility that even in a universe governed by randomness and absurdity, there might still be an underlying pattern that gives meaning to our existence. Sweet dreams, and may your own family mythology be slightly less complicated than the Griffins. Picture this. You're lying in bed, eyes heavy, ready to drift off to sleep, but your mind is still buzzing. Maybe you need something to help you unwind, something familiar and comforting that won't keep you too engaged. Well, tonight we're diving into the weird and wonderful world of Family Guy with some absolutely wild facts that might just be the perfect bedtime companion. These aren't your typical trivia tidbits. We're talking about the kind of behind-the-scenes secrets and bizarre details that make this show the cultural phenomenon it became. Let me start with something that'll blow your mind right away. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice? Yeah, you heard that right. The show got the axe in 2002 after just 3 seasons, then came back in 2005, only to get canceled again in 2007. But here's where it gets interesting. The show's resurrection wasn't because of some executive's change of heart or a passionate fan campaign, though those things helped. It was actually because of DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim that proved the show had a massive audience that networks had completely missed. The numbers were staggering. When Fox looked at the DVD sales figures, they realized they'd made a colossal mistake. The first season DVD became one of the best-selling TV show DVDs of all time, moving over 1 million copies in its first year. Adult Swim was paying Fox millions for the rerun rights, and the ratings were through the roof. It was like discovering you'd thrown away a winning lottery ticket, except you could still fish it out of the trash. But here's something even weirder about the show's cancellation drama. Seth MacFarlane, the creator, was actually somewhat relieved when it got canceled the first time. He was completely burned out from working insane hours, writing, voice acting, and overseeing every aspect of production. The guy was doing the voices for 3 main characters while running the entire show. When Fox pulled the plug, he thought his animation career might be over, but he also felt like he could finally breathe again. Speaking of Seth MacFarlane, here's a fact that'll keep you up at night thinking about alternate timelines. He was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11 on September 11th, 2001. The flight that hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center. He missed it because his travel agent gave him the wrong departure time, and he showed up to the gate 10 minutes after boarding had ended. He was hungover from partying the night before and almost didn't go to the airport at all. That single hangover and miscommunication might have changed television history forever. Now let's talk about something that'll make you appreciate the show's attention to detail. Every single Conway Twitty cutaway gag. You know those random moments where the show just cuts to the country singer performing for what feels like an eternity? Those weren't just random filler. They were actually Seth MacFarlane's way of trolling both the network and the audience. He knew these segments would drive people absolutely crazy, but he also knew they couldn't be cut because they were integral to reaching the episode's required runtime. The Conway Twitty thing became such a phenomenon that it spawned its own internal mythology at the show. Writers would pitch entire episodes around how they could work in a Conway Twitty segment. They'd sit in the writer's room timing these segments down to the second, calculating exactly how much actual story content they could replace with a dead country singer performing on stage. It was comedic genius disguised as laziness. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's voice acting. You know how Brian the dog sounds so sophisticated and intellectual? Well, Seth MacFarlane based that voice on his own natural speaking voice, but slightly more pretentious. He said in interviews that Brian represents the version of himself he'd be if he let his college education go to his head. The character became a way for MacFarlane to explore his own intellectual insecurities and liberal political views through a talking dog. But the really fascinating part is how the other voice actors developed their characters. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois, originally auditioned for a completely different character on a different show MacFarlane was developing. When that project fell through, he remembered her voice and wrote Lois specifically for her. The character's Long Island accent and particular speech patterns are actually based on Borstein's own family members. Seth Green, who voices Chris, has admitted that he sometimes forgets he's supposed to be playing a teenager. He said the character's voice just comes naturally to him because it's basically his own voice from when he was going through puberty, which apparently lasted well into his 20s. The character's dim-witted but lovable personality evolved because Green kept improvising lines that made the writers laugh during recording sessions. Now here's a production fact that'll make you realize how much work goes into seemingly simple animation. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 8 to 9 months to produce, from script to final broadcast. The writing process alone can take several months, with jokes being written, rewritten, and completely scrapped dozens of times. Then there's the voice recording, which happens in multiple sessions as scripts get revised. The animation process is where things get really wild. Every single frame has to be drawn by hand, even though the show uses computer software to assist with the process. A single 22-minute episode contains roughly 16,000 individual drawings. When you think about the fact that the show has produced over 400 episodes, that's literally millions of individual drawings that have brought these characters to life. But here's something that'll make you appreciate the show's cultural impact even more. Family Guy popularized the random cutaway gag format that's now become standard in animated comedy. Before Family Guy, most animated shows followed more traditional narrative structures. The show's willingness to completely abandon the main plot for a 30-second historical recreation or pop culture reference changed how comedy writers think about pacing and attention spans. The cutaway gags themselves have become a cultural phenomenon. There are entire YouTube channels dedicated to compiling them, and they've been referenced and parodied by countless other shows. But here's what's really interesting. The writers have admitted that sometimes they write the cutaway gag first, then build an entire episode around finding a way to naturally lead into it. Let's talk about something that might disturb your peaceful drift toward sleep, the show's relationship with censorship. Family Guy has been censored, banned, and protested more than almost any other primetime animated series. The Parents Television Council has named it the worst show on television multiple times. But here's the thing. All that controversy has only made the show more popular. The censorship battles have led to some genuinely creative solutions from the writers. When they can't say certain words or show certain images, they find increasingly elaborate ways to imply them. Some of the show's funniest moments have come from these creative workarounds. It's like watching a comedian perform with their hands tied behind their back, and somehow becoming even funnier because of the constraint. Here's a fact about the show's music that might surprise you. Seth MacFarlane is actually a classically trained vocalist who's released several albums of standards and jazz music. His musical background heavily influences the show's frequent musical numbers and elaborate song and dance sequences. Those aren't just random additions. They're MacFarlane showing off skills he developed long before he ever got into animation. The musical episodes of Family Guy often take months of additional preparation because they require completely different animation techniques, additional voice coaching for the actors, and original orchestral arrangements. The Blue Harvest Star Wars parody episodes alone required hiring an entire orchestra to record new versions of John Williams' iconic themes. Now, let's dive into something that'll make you think about celebrity culture differently. The show's celebrity cameos and parodies have occasionally led to real-world consequences for the celebrities involved. Some stars have embraced being mocked on the show, treating it as a badge of honor. Others have publicly complained or even threatened legal action. But here's what's really fascinating. Some celebrities have specifically requested to be made fun of on Family Guy because they know it'll keep them relevant in pop culture. The show has become such a cultural touchstone that being parodied on it is almost like being inducted into a Hall of Fame of American entertainment figures. The writers have developed an entire system for deciding which celebrities to target. They consider factors like current relevance, comedic potential, and likelihood of legal retaliation. There's literally a legal department that reviews every celebrity reference to make sure the show won't get sued into oblivion. Here's something about the show's international appeal that might keep your mind wandering as you fall asleep. Family Guy airs in over 100 countries, but many episodes have to be heavily edited or completely banned in certain regions due to cultural sensitivities or government censorship. The writers have become experts at predicting which jokes will translate across cultures and which ones will get the show pulled off the air in entire countries. The international dubbing process is particularly fascinating. Voice actors in different countries have to capture not just the literal translations of the jokes, but also the timing, delivery, and cultural references that make the humor work. Sometimes entire scenes have to be rewritten for different markets, with completely different jokes that serve the same narrative function. Speaking of narrative function, here's something about the show's storytelling that might surprise you. Despite its reputation for random, stream-of-consciousness humor, every episode follows extremely strict structural guidelines. The writers use a detailed formula for pacing, character development, and plot progression that's remained virtually unchanged since the show's early seasons. The formula is so precise that new writers go through extensive training to learn it. They practice writing sample episodes that hit specific comedic beats at exact timing intervals. It's like learning to write music in a very particular key and tempo. There's way more technical skill involved than most viewers realize. Here's a production detail that'll make you appreciate the voice actors even more. Most of the main voice cast records their lines together in the same studio, which is actually unusual for animated shows. Many animated series record each actor separately for scheduling convenience. But Family Guy's ensemble cast has developed such strong chemistry that they actually improvise and play off each other during recording sessions. These improvisation sessions have led to some of the show's most memorable moments. Jokes that weren't in the original script, character interactions that reveal new personality traits, and entire comedic sequences that grew out of the actors just goofing around in the studio. The writers have learned to leave space in their scripts for this kind of spontaneous creativity. The show's relationship with current events is another fascinating aspect of its production. Episodes are produced so far in advance that writers have to predict what will be culturally relevant 8 to 9 months in the future. They've developed an almost supernatural ability to anticipate which celebrities will still be famous, which political issues will still matter, and which pop culture references will still be funny by the time episodes air. Sometimes they get it spectacularly wrong, leading to episodes that reference celebrities who've completely disappeared from public consciousness, or make jokes about events that ended up being resolved in completely different ways. These temporal mismatches have become part of the show's charm, creating accidental time capsules of what people were thinking about during specific periods. Here's something about the show's merchandise empire that might occupy your thoughts as you drift off. Family Guy generates hundreds of millions of dollars in merchandise sales annually, from t-shirts and mugs to video games and Halloween costumes. The licensing department has to approve thousands of product designs, ensuring that everything maintains the show's comedic voice while being commercially viable. The most successful merchandise items are often the most random ones. Stewie's football head design became a best-selling plush toy. Brian's martini glass became a popular bar accessory. Peter's chicken fight with Ernie became an entire line of action figures. These products have introduced the show to audiences who might never watch it on television. As we wind down our journey through the bizarre world of Family Guy facts, here's one last thing to ponder as you close your eyes. The show has fundamentally changed how we consume comedy. It's trained an entire generation of viewers to expect rapid-fire jokes, constant pop culture references, and narrative structures that can pivot in completely unexpected directions at any moment. This influence extends far beyond television. You can see Family Guy's impact in internet memes, social media humor, and even in how people tell stories in everyday conversation. The show's cutaway gag. Structure has become a template for how we process and share information in the digital age. Those random tangents and seemingly unrelated references? They're everywhere now, From Twitter threads to TikTok videos, the show created a new language of comedy that's become so pervasive we barely notice it anymore. When someone starts telling a story, then suddenly pivots to a completely unrelated memory that somehow connects back to the original point, they're unconsciously using a Family Guy narrative structure. When someone makes a reference to an obscure piece of pop culture from decades ago to explain something happening today, they're speaking fluent Family Guy. So there you have it. As you drift off to sleep tonight, you can rest easy knowing that somewhere in the world, animators are drawing thousands of individual frames to bring new episodes to life. Voice actors are improvising lines that will make millions of people laugh, and writers are crafting jokes that will still be quoted years from now. The strange, wonderful, chaotic world of Family Guy continues to evolve, one random cutaway gag at a time. Sweet dreams. And remember, if you find yourself having weird dreams about talking dogs, evil babies, or inexplicably long Conway Twitty performances, you'll know exactly where those images came from. The show that changed comedy forever has probably infiltrated your subconscious too, joining the ranks of viewers who've been shaped by its unique brand of organized chaos. Hey, sleepyheads, if you're settling in for the night and need something to drift off to, you've come to the right place. Tonight we're diving into the wonderfully weird world of Family Guy, with some absolutely wild facts that'll either put you to sleep or keep you up, wondering how the heck this show got away with some of this stuff. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll have enough random Family Guy knowledge to impress literally no one at parties. But hey, that's what we're here for. Let's start with something that'll blow your mind. Did you know that Peter Griffin has technically been married to Lois longer in real time than some actual married couples have been together? The show premiered in 1999, which means Peter and Lois have been cartoon married for over 25 years now. That's longer than a lot of Hollywood marriages last, and considering all the ridiculous stuff Peter puts Lois through, it's honestly impressive she hasn't left him for someone with at least 2 functioning brain cells. Speaking of Peter's questionable decision-making skills, here's a fact that might make you question everything you thought you knew about the show. Peter Griffin has actually cheated on Lois multiple times throughout the series, but not always in the way you'd expect. There was that whole episode where Peter literally got injected with what the doctors called a gay gene during a medical experiment. Now, I know what you're thinking, and yes, this is as ridiculous as it sounds. Peter needed money for medical bills, saw an ad for volunteers for medical research, and being Peter, he didn't ask any questions before signing up. The doctors at this research facility were apparently working on some kind of gene therapy, and Peter ended up getting injected with this experimental serum that was supposed to make him gay. The kicker? He only did it because they offered him $125. That's right, Peter Griffin's sexuality was temporarily altered, for the price of a decent vacuum cleaner. Only on Family Guy would someone's entire identity shift because of what amounts to pocket change. But here's where it gets really interesting. Once the serum kicked in, Peter didn't just become gay, he became like stereotypically gay. We're talking about a guy who suddenly knew all the best brunch spots in town and started making homemade muffins. Lois was initially upset about the whole situation until she tasted those muffins, and then she was suddenly okay with having a gay husband. It's like she discovered the secret to getting Peter to actually contribute to household duties was a medical experiment gone wrong. The really wild part is that Peter ended up getting a boyfriend named Scott, and he was completely ready to leave his entire family for this guy. Peter literally told Lois he was leaving her for his new soulmate, packed his bags, and started living his best gay life. They went to fancy restaurants, which is probably more romantic attention than Lois had gotten in years, and Peter was genuinely happy. The effects were supposed to wear off eventually, but nobody knew when. The doctor said it could be anywhere from a week to a year, which is quite possibly the most unhelpful medical diagnosis in television history. Meanwhile, Brian and Stewie decided they needed to fix this situation, so they sent Peter to what was essentially conversion therapy, which obviously didn't work. Scott got worried when Peter disappeared for 2 days and showed up at the Griffin house looking for him. When Lois found out what Brian had done, she wasn't happy, and they all rushed to rescue Peter from this ridiculous straight camp. Here's the kicker though. When Peter and Scott were finally reunited, Scott had a special surprise planned. Remember how Peter had mentioned that his ultimate fantasy was to have an 11-way? Well, Scott made that happen. Can you imagine being in Peter's shoes when the effects finally wore off after 2.5 weeks? The man went from living his best life to probably needing serious therapy. But that wasn't even the only time Peter stepped out on his marriage. There was another incident involving his special mirrored sunglasses that accidentally revealed he was getting calls from a secret boyfriend. Peter was playing poker, and because he's Peter, he was wearing these ridiculous sunglasses that basically showed everyone his cards. But that wasn't even the stupidest part. When his phone rang during the game, everyone could see in his sunglasses that the contact was saved as his secret boyfriend. The man literally had no concept of how to keep a secret. Peter's excuse for taking the call? He told everyone it was his wife. Smooth, Peter. Real smooth. This is the same guy who somehow managed to maintain an entire second family in Chicago. That's right. Peter Griffin had a whole other life where he pretended to be the mother of someone else's children. He would tell his real family he was going on business trips, fly to Chicago, change clothes in a taxi, and then show up at this other house where a bunch of kids would greet him like he was their mom. I have so many questions about this arrangement that I don't think I want answered. Like, whose kids were those? How did this living situation even come about? And most importantly, how did Peter manage to keep this secret when he couldn't even hide a boyfriend's contact information on his phone? The man's inconsistency is honestly impressive. Then there was the time Peter got amnesia and forgot he was married to Lois entirely. This happened when the Griffin family somehow ended up on Family Feud, because of course they did. Peter got into a fight with Richard Dawson, which honestly seems about right for Peter's personality, and ended up flying headfirst into a table. The impact gave him complete amnesia, and he had no idea who Lois or his kids were. The doctor said Peter's memory could come back anywhere from days to years, which again, super helpful medical advice. Lois tried everything to jog his memory, including showing him old home movies, but Peter just got distracted by random things in the background. The man's attention span was somehow even worse with amnesia than it was normally. Here's where things got weird, though. Peter might not have remembered being married to Lois, but some things about his personality remained intact, like the fact that he was a complete pervert. He started creeping on Lois, not realizing she was actually his wife and that he could just ask her to sleep with him. When Lois explained the situation, Peter was over the moon. He basically got to lose his virginity all over again, except this time with someone who actually knew what they were doing. But Peter's amnesia brain didn't quite understand the boundaries of marriage. He seemed to think that if he could sleep with Lois, he could probably sleep with anyone in the house. This led to Lois having to explain, in the most awkward way possible, that he couldn't have relations with the kids. That's a sentence no parent should ever have to say. But then again, this is Peter Griffin we're talking about. The amnesia situation got even more complicated when Peter decided he didn't want to be married anymore. He thought the whole concept was stupid and decided to become a bachelor. So suddenly, Lois and the kids were kicked out of their own house and had to move to a crappy apartment in the city, while Peter lived it up as a single man. He was throwing parties, bringing home different women every night, and generally living like he was 25 years old instead of a middle-aged father of 3. The really messed up part is that Peter got his memory back after about a day, but he decided to keep pretending he had amnesia because he was enjoying the bachelor lifestyle too much. Meanwhile, Quagmire was making moves on Lois in her vulnerable state, and Brian had to rush to tell Peter what was happening. Peter finally confessed that his memory had returned, but only because he didn't want Quagmire sleeping with his wife. The fact that he was willing to abandon his family for random hookups but drew the line at Quagmire says a lot about Peter's priorities. One of the most bizarre cheating incidents involved Peter falling in love with a cardboard cutout. This wasn't some quick gag either. Peter literally brought home a cardboard stand-up of model Kathy Ireland and treated it like a real relationship. He introduced the cutout to his kids, took it out to dinner, and somehow managed to have what he considered a physical relationship with it. The logistics of this situation are something I don't think anyone wants to think too hard about. Peter was so committed to this cardboard romance that he told his kids Kathy was their new mom. Lois was still living in the house and honestly seemed pretty unbothered by the whole thing. She figured it would blow over eventually, and she was probably right, except that Chris decided to take Kathy into his room for his own purposes. When Peter found out, he was so angry that he shook the cutout, and her cardboard head literally fell off, ending the relationship in the most anticlimactic way possible. The show also had this meta episode where they pretended to show behind-the-scenes footage of the Family Guy cast, and in this fake documentary, we found out that Peter was supposedly cheating on Lois with an 18-year-old intern. When confronted about the naked pictures on his phone, Peter's excuse was that his phone number used to belong to the intern's ex-boyfriend, so the pictures were sent by mistake. Then, when pressed further, he claimed it was the Cloud's fault. The Cloud people. Peter Griffin blamed technology for his infidelity. What made this even worse was that Lois revealed this had happened 5 times, and some of the pictures actually had Peter in them too. At this point, you have to wonder about Lois's self-respect. But then again, she's been putting up with Peter's nonsense for over 2 decades. So maybe she's just developed an immunity to his stupidity. Throughout all of these incidents, there's this running theme of Peter having absolutely no understanding of how relationships work. Whether he's temporarily gay, suffering from amnesia, or falling in love with cardboard, he consistently makes choices that any reasonable person would recognize as relationship ending. Yet somehow, Lois always takes him back, and they return to their dysfunctional but apparently unbreakable marriage. The fascinating thing about Peter's various infidelities is how they reflect different aspects of his character. When he's gay, he becomes more thoughtful and domestic. When he has amnesia, his base instincts take over. When he's with the cardboard cutout, it shows his complete detachment from reality. Each scenario reveals something different about what makes Peter tick, even if none of it makes him a better husband. What's really interesting is how the show treats these situations as comedy rather than serious relationship problems. In real life, most of these incidents would result in divorce, therapy, or at minimum, some serious conversations about boundaries and commitment. But in the Family Guy universe, they're just Tuesday. Peter can maintain a secret family, inject himself with experimental drugs, or forget his wife exists entirely, and by the end of the episode, everything goes back to normal. This reflects the show's overall approach to continuity and consequences. Family Guy operates in a world where actions don't have lasting impact, where characters can experience major life changes that are completely forgotten by the next episode. It's part of what allows the show to push boundaries and explore ridiculous scenarios without worrying about long-term narrative consistency. The fact that Peter has cheated on Lois in so many different ways also highlights the show's commitment to mining comedy from uncomfortable situations. Seth MacFarlane and the writing team seem to delight in finding new ways to make Peter an even worse husband, while somehow keeping him sympathetic enough that audiences don't completely turn against him. And there you have it, folks. Peter Griffin's extensive history of marital infidelity, from gay gene experiments to cardboard cutout romances. Sweet dreams. And try not to think too hard about the logistics of any of this. If you enjoyed learning about Peter's questionable relationship choices, make sure to subscribe for more random animated facts that serve no practical purpose but might help you fall asleep. Until next time, keep it weird, keep it random, and remember that somewhere out there, Peter Griffin is probably doing something that would end most marriages but will be completely forgotten by next episode. Picture this. You're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone at 2 a.m, and suddenly, you remember that time Peter Griffin literally married a cardboard cutout of himself. Welcome to the weird, wild world of Family Guy, where the most random facts are often the most fascinating ones. Tonight, we're diving deep into the strangest corners of Quahog, with facts so bizarre they'll either help you drift off to sleep or keep you awake, wondering how the writers even came up with this stuff. Let me start with something that'll blow your mind. Did you know that the original concept for Family Guy was completely different from what we got? Seth MacFarlane initially pitched the show as a much darker comedy about a dysfunctional family dealing with serious issues. The network executives were so confused by the pilot that they almost didn't pick it up. Thank goodness they did. Because otherwise, we wouldn't have gems like the time Brian became a used car salesman and accidentally sold Death his own car. Speaking of Brian, here's a fact that might surprise you. The character was originally supposed to be much more of a background character, basically just the family pet who occasionally made sarcastic comments. But Seth MacFarlane loved voicing him so much that Brian gradually became one of the main characters. This explains why Brian's personality seems to evolve so dramatically throughout the early seasons. He went from being a simple talking dog to a pretentious intellectual with daddy issues and a drinking problem. Now let's talk about something truly random. The chicken fight scenes between Peter and Ernie the giant chicken weren't supposed to become a recurring gag. The first fight scene in the episode Da Boom was meant to be a one-off joke. But the animators had so much fun creating the elaborate fight sequence that they kept bringing it back. Each subsequent chicken fight got more elaborate and destructive, eventually involving helicopters, submarines, and entire city blocks being demolished. The longest chicken fight lasted nearly 4 minutes of screen time, which is practically an eternity in television comedy. Here's something that'll make you appreciate the show's attention to detail. Every time you see the Griffin house, the layout is actually consistent throughout the series. The creators took the time to map out every room, every hallway, every closet in the house, so that when characters move around, it makes spatial sense. This is incredibly rare in animated comedies, where houses often have impossible layouts that change depending on what the joke requires. The Griffin house blueprints are actually available online, and fans have used them to build accurate replicas in video games and even real life. Moving on to character quirks. Did you know that Meg's unpopularity at school was originally supposed to be temporary? The writers planned to have her eventually find her place and become more confident, but the running gag of everyone treating Meg terribly became so popular with audiences that they decided to make it a permanent part of her character. Mila Kunis, who voices Meg, has said in interviews that she sometimes feels bad about all the abuse her character receives, but she understands that it's become essential to the show's dynamic. Let's dive into some voice acting trivia that's perfect for late-night pondering. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 main characters on the show, but he almost didn't voice Stewie at all. The original plan was to have Stewie voiced by a child actor, but MacFarlane was worried about the controversial things Stewie would say and didn't want to put a real child in that position. So he developed Stewie's distinctive British accent as a way to make the character's adult thoughts coming from a baby's mouth even more surreal and funny. Chris Griffin's voice is another interesting story. Seth Green, who voices Chris, has to actively make his voice higher and more nasal to sound like a teenage boy. As Green has gotten older, it's become more challenging for him to hit those high notes, so the sound engineers often have to digitally adjust his voice in post-production. This is why Chris's voice sometimes sounds slightly different between episodes, depending on how much digital manipulation was required. Here's a fact that connects to real-world events in a weird way. The episode where Peter starts his own political party called the Tea Party Patriots was written and animated before the actual Tea Party movement became prominent in American politics. When the episode aired, many viewers thought it was a commentary on current events, but it was actually just an incredible coincidence. The writers had to add a disclaimer explaining that any similarity to real political movements was purely accidental. Now for something completely different. The Pawtucket Brewery, where Peter works, is based on a real brewery in Rhode Island. Seth MacFarlane grew up in the area and used to drive past the brewery every day. He thought it would be funny to have his lazy cartoon character work at a place that produces something that would make him even lazier. The real brewery owners were initially concerned about being associated with the show, but eventually embraced it when they realized it was bringing them tourists. Let's talk about some of the show's more obscure running gags. You know how Conway Twitty always seems to appear at random moments? This started as an inside joke among the writers who were fans of old country music. They would play Conway Twitty songs during late-night writing sessions to keep themselves awake. Eventually, they decided to work him into the show as a bizarre non sequitur that would confuse viewers and break up the pacing in unexpected ways. The Conway Twitty segments are actually some of the most expensive parts of the show to produce because they have to pay for the music rights. Here's something that'll make you look at Cleveland differently. When Cleveland got his own spin-off show, the original plan was for him to stay in Quahog, and the spin-off would focus on his adventures around town. But the writers realized that would be too limiting, so they created the elaborate storyline where his house gets destroyed and he moves to Virginia. The bathtub falling through multiple houses scene took months to animate and became one of the most memorable moments in the show's history, even though it was essentially just a setup for a spin-off that only lasted 4 seasons. Speaking of spin-offs, did you know that there was almost a Stewie and Brian road trip series? The popularity of their travel episodes convinced executives that the dynamic between the sophisticated baby and the intellectual dog could carry its own show. Scripts were written for 6 episodes before the project was scrapped due to budget concerns. Some of those unused scripts were later reworked into regular Family Guy episodes, which explains why some Stewie and Brian adventures feel more elaborate than usual. Let's get into some animation secrets that most viewers never notice. The way characters' eyes are drawn actually follows a complex mathematical formula to ensure they always look natural when the characters move their heads. This might sound boring, but it's actually fascinating when you realize that most animated shows just wing it and hope for the best. Family Guy's attention to eye movement is part of what makes the characters feel more alive and expressive than typical cartoon characters. Here's a weird fact about the show's merchandising history. The most popular Family Guy product ever sold wasn't a t-shirt or a toy. It was a cookbook called the Family Guy Cookbook that featured recipes supposedly created by each character. Peter's section was all comfort food and beer-based dishes. Lois had elegant dinner party recipes. Stewie contributed sophisticated international cuisine. And Brian's section was dinner for 15, entirely vegetarian. The cookbook actually received positive reviews from real food critics, which nobody expected. Now for some trivia about the show's cancellation and revival that goes beyond what most people know. When Family Guy was first canceled, Seth MacFarlane was actually relieved. He was exhausted from working on the show and wanted to pursue other projects. But the DVD sales were so strong and the fan campaign so persistent that Fox offered him a deal he couldn't refuse, including complete creative control and a substantial budget increase. This is why the post-cancellation episodes often feel more ambitious and experimental than the early ones. The show's relationship with censors has always been complicated. But here's something most people don't realize. Family Guy actually has one of the most cooperative relationships with network censors of any adult animated show. Seth MacFarlane learned early on that if you give censors multiple options and let them feel like they're part of the creative process, they'll often let you get away with more controversial content. The writers deliberately write jokes they know will get cut, just so they can negotiate to keep the jokes they really want. Let's talk about some character backstories that were developed but never made it into episodes. Quagmire was originally supposed to have a twin brother who was everything he wasn't, completely respectful and monogamous. This character was going to be introduced as a way to explore Quagmire's personality through contrast, but the writers decided it would be funnier to keep him as an irredeemable character without any redemptive family members to soften his edges. Joe Swanson's backstory is much more detailed than what we see on screen. The writers created an entire timeline of his police career before his accident, including the names of his partners, his most famous cases, and even his police academy graduation rank. None of this has ever been mentioned in the show, but it helps the writers keep his character consistent and gives them material to draw from when they need Joe to demonstrate police knowledge or skills. Here's something about the show's music that might surprise you. Every musical number in Family Guy is performed live by the voice actors, even when their characters are supposed to be bad singers. Seth MacFarlane, who has released several jazz albums, insisted on this approach because he believes it makes the musical moments feel more authentic. This means that when Peter sings off-key, Seth MacFarlane is actually deliberately singing badly, which is apparently much harder than just singing well. The relationship between Family Guy and The Simpsons goes deeper than their famous crossover episode. The two shows' writing staffs have been trading jokes and references for years in a friendly rivalry that most viewers never notice. If you watch carefully, you'll spot subtle Simpsons references in Family Guy episodes and vice versa. This tradition started when several Family Guy writers were hired away from The Simpsons, and they maintained friendships with their former colleagues. Now, here's a production fact that explains a lot about the show's pacing. Family Guy episodes are actually written to be about 30 minutes long, but they're edited down to fit the 22-minute television format. This means there are about 8 minutes of content cut from every episode. These deleted scenes aren't just throwaway jokes either. They often contain character development and plot details that would make the episodes feel more complete. Some of these deleted scenes have been released on DVD collections, and they often change how you interpret the episodes. The show's approach to celebrity guest stars is completely different from most animated comedies. Instead of having celebrities play themselves or obvious parodies of themselves, Family Guy often casts them as completely random characters. This creates a fun game for viewers who recognize the voices but can't immediately place where they know them from. Adam West playing the mayor was the template for this approach, and it's been incredibly successful at attracting high-profile guest stars who want to try something different. Let's explore some of the show's more philosophical elements that get overlooked because of all the random humor. The relationship between Stewie and Brian is actually a sophisticated exploration of the friendship between youth and experience. Stewie represents unlimited potential and ambition, while Brian represents the reality of compromise and disappointment that comes with age. Their adventures often end with both characters learning something, but in subtle ways that don't feel preachy or forced. The show's treatment of time travel and alternate realities follows surprisingly consistent rules. The writers created an internal logic system for how these sci-fi elements work in the Family Guy universe, even though they rarely explain it to viewers. This attention to detail is why the time travel episodes feel coherent instead of just random, and it allows them to create genuine consequences for the characters' actions across multiple episodes. Here's something about the animation process that most people never consider. Each episode of Family Guy requires approximately 15,000 individual drawings. The animators have developed shortcuts and techniques to make this process more efficient, but it still takes about 8 months from the initial script to the finished episode. This explains why the show sometimes references events that seem outdated by the time the episode airs. The references were current when the episode was being written and animated. The voice recording process is also more complex than most people realize. While some animated shows record all the voices separately, Family Guy often records the main cast together in the same room. This creates more natural-sounding conversations and allows the actors to play off each other's energy. Seth MacFarlane switches between his different character voices during these sessions, which the other actors say is both impressive and slightly disturbing to witness in person. Now for some trivia about the show's impact on popular culture that goes beyond the obvious memes and catchphrases. Family Guy has been credited with popularizing the rapid-fire pop culture reference style that's now common in comedy. Before Family Guy, most TV shows would make 1 or 2 cultural references per episode. Family Guy started making dozens of references per episode, training audiences to catch quick jokes and creating a more interactive viewing experience. The show's influence on internet culture is also significant. Family Guy was one of the first TV shows to embrace online fan communities and viral marketing. The creators regularly engage with fans on social media and have incorporated fan suggestions into actual episodes. This relationship between creators and fans has become the standard for modern entertainment. But Family Guy was pioneering this approach when most TV executives were still afraid of the internet. Finally, here's a fact that brings everything full circle. Despite all the random humor and bizarre storylines, Family Guy is actually one of the most carefully planned shows on television. Every season has an overarching theme that connects the episodes, even though these themes are subtle enough that most viewers don't consciously notice them. The writers map out character development arcs that span multiple seasons, ensuring that even the most outrageous episodes contribute to larger storytelling goals. As you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that somewhere in the world, there are people whose full-time job is deciding exactly how long Peter Griffin's fights with a giant chicken should last. Sweet dreams, and may your nights be filled with fewer random cutaway gags than the average Family Guy episode. Have you ever wondered what happens when celebrities get roasted so hard by Family Guy that they actually fight back? Tonight, we're diving into the wild world of bruised egos, angry tweets, and even courtroom drama. Some of these reactions will shock you, others might make you laugh, but all of them prove that not everyone can take a joke when Seth MacFarlane comes calling. Picture this. You're an Oscar-winning actor at the top of your game, and suddenly millions of people are watching an animated dog make fun of your nose. That's exactly what happened to Adrien Brody. And let me tell you, he did not find it amusing. During a murder mystery episode where characters are getting picked off one by one, Tom Tucker gets cornered by the other guests who think he's the killer. When they finally take him down, someone delivers this brutal line about casting Brody in a movie adaptation, basically saying nobody would want to watch it. But Family Guy wasn't finished with poor Adrien yet. They doubled down with another scene featuring Meg on a date watching a 3D movie. What's playing on screen? Adrien Brody doing shirtless sit-ups, and his famously prominent nose literally pokes out of the screen in full 3-dimensional glory. It's the kind of visual gag that makes you cringe and laugh at the same time. So, how did the Academy Award winner handle being the butt of these jokes? Not gracefully. According to Seth MacFarlane himself, in interviews, Seth revealed that when he approached Brody at a Hollywood party to smooth things over, mentioning how much he enjoyed one of Brody's films, the actor made it crystal clear that there were definitely hard feelings. No amount of compliments about his work could undo the sting of those animated jabs. This brings us to our next celebrity casualty. And this one gets really messy because it involves politics and personal family matters. Sarah Palin found herself in Family Guy's crosshairs during an episode where Chris goes on a date with a girl who has Down syndrome. During their dinner conversation, the girl casually mentions her family background, specifically that her mother used to be the governor of Alaska. Now, unless there's another former Alaskan governor out there with a child named Ellen, this was clearly aimed at Sarah Palin and her family situation. The timing made this particularly sensitive because Palin's son, who has Down syndrome, was only 2 years old at the time. The Palin family's reaction was swift and fierce. Sarah took to social media calling Family Guy a pathetic cartoon and labeling the creators heartless jerks. But she didn't stop there. She appeared on television talk shows, describing the writers as cruel and cold-hearted people who had crossed a line by making jokes about the disabled community. Family Guy fired back through Seth MacFarlane, who pointed out something interesting during his own television appearance. The character making those comments was actually voiced by Andrea Friedman, an actress who herself has Down syndrome. This actress later clarified that she felt the joke was directed at Sarah Palin personally, not at people with disabilities, and she even suggested that Palin simply didn't have a sense of humor about the situation. But sometimes Family Guy doesn't even need to directly target someone to cause controversy. Chloe Grace Moretz learned this the hard way when she became collateral damage in an internet phenomenon. During an episode where Peter decides to lose weight so he can ride a roller coaster, he sets his sights on looking as good as a character called Legs Go All the Way Up Griffin. This character was basically a visual gag. All legs with no torso. The joke itself had nothing to do with Moretz, but someone online photoshopped her picture to match this character design, and the image went viral across social media platforms. While the internet found it hilarious, Moretz definitely didn't. She publicly stated that this manipulated image seriously affected her body image and self-confidence, causing her to retreat from public appearances for a while. The cruel irony is that Family Guy never even mentioned her name, but she still got caught in the crossfire of internet culture. Speaking of crossing lines, Family Guy once ventured into territory so sensitive that it sparked outrage from disability advocates, religious groups, and grieving family members alike. They decided to create a school play episode featuring Terry Schiavo, the woman who became the center of one of America's most heartbreaking right-to-die legal battles. In typical Family Guy fashion, they turned this tragic real-life situation into a musical number performed by preschoolers. The kids sang cheerful songs with lyrics comparing Schiavo to an expensive plant that should just be unplugged. Even within the show, Brian questioned whether it was too soon for such material. But that didn't stop the episode from airing. The backlash was immediate and intense. Terry's own brother, Bobby Schindler Jr., was so furious about what he saw as insensitive treatment of his family's tragedy that he actually called for Fox to cancel Family Guy entirely. Religious groups and disability advocates joined the chorus of criticism, arguing that some subjects should be off-limits, even for satirical comedy. Now, getting roasted by Family Guy hits different when you're a comedian yourself. Rachel Bloom, creator and star of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, discovered this firsthand during an episode where Brian impulsively marries a woman with cancer. The storyline gets complicated when the woman's cancer goes into remission, leaving Brian stuck in a marriage he never really wanted. To make matters worse for Brian, his new wife gains weight, develops some unpleasant habits, and constantly gushes about her favorite television show. That's where Family Guy took their shot at Bloom's creation, having the character describe Crazy Ex-Girlfriend in dismissive terms, focusing on a musical number about menstruation, and suggesting that watching such shows makes someone unattractive and unlikable. Bloom's reaction was more nuanced than outright fury, but she definitely wasn't laughing. She pointed out that the scene reeked of male condescension, essentially equating appreciation for her show with being an undesirable woman. While she didn't launch a full-scale public campaign against Family Guy, her response made it clear that she felt the jab was rooted in sexist assumptions about female-created content. Sometimes, though, celebrities handle Family Guy roasts with unexpected maturity. Dax Shepard found himself on the receiving end of a quick but cutting intelligence joke during an episode where Brian discovers he has a brain tumor. When the family learns the tumor is benign and debates whether Brian should have surgery, someone quips about whether Dax Shepard turned out all right, clearly questioning his intelligence. Rather than ranting on social media or giving angry interviews, Shepard took a different approach. He brought up the joke directly with Seth MacFarlane during an appearance on his own podcast. He acknowledged that he understood the writers weren't trying to be malicious and recognized the nuanced nature of comedy, but he was honest about the fact that it still stung a little. This mature, direct conversation probably earned him more respect than any angry response could have. One of the most interesting cases involves James Woods, who went from being Family Guy's most willing participant to eventually walking away from the show entirely. For years, Woods not only tolerated being parodied but actively participated, voicing an exaggerated version of himself in multiple episodes. He played up his persona as a chaotic, scheming character who would steal identities, fake his own death, and constantly torment the Griffin family. Woods initially embraced the self-parody, even refusing payment because he genuinely enjoyed making fun of himself. This collaboration worked brilliantly for both parties, giving Family Guy a celebrity who was game for anything while allowing Woods to show his sense of humor. But by 2018, something changed. Woods became more politically vocal on social media, and when Family Guy offered him another episode, he turned it down. He tweeted that he felt the new material was too politically biased, and worse than being offensive, it simply wasn't funny anymore. He accused the show of becoming mean-spirited rather than genuinely comedic. After that public criticism, Woods disappeared from Family Guy entirely, marking the end of one of their most successful celebrity partnerships. The most extreme legal response came from Carol Burnett, who decided that if Family Guy was going to use her intellectual property, she was going to make them pay for it literally. The controversy stemmed from a brief scene where Quagmire visits an adult bookstore, and viewers catch a glimpse of Burnett's iconic charwoman character from her classic sketch show working as a janitor. The appearance lasted maybe 2 seconds and seemed relatively harmless by Family Guy standards, but Burnett saw it as a serious violation of her rights. She filed a lawsuit against Fox, claiming copyright infringement and misuse of her character without permission. She wasn't seeking a small settlement either. Reports indicated she wanted somewhere between $2 and $6 million in damages. The legal system didn't side with Burnett, however. Judge Dean Pregerson dismissed the case, ruling that Family Guy was protected under First Amendment parody provisions. Interestingly, though, the judge did note that while the show was legally protected, he found the scene distasteful and offensive to Burnett personally. So while she didn't win any money, she did get judicial acknowledgement that her feelings were valid. These reactions reveal something fascinating about celebrity culture and comedy boundaries. Some stars, like Dax Shepard and initially James Woods, showed they could laugh at themselves and engage constructively with satirical content. Others, like Adrian Brody and Sarah Palin, felt genuinely hurt and responded with public criticism. Still, others like Carol Burnett saw legal violations that needed addressing through the court system. What makes Family Guy's celebrity controversies particularly interesting is how they reflect broader conversations about comedy, free speech, and personal dignity in the digital age. When a show has millions of viewers and endless social media amplification, even a brief joke can follow someone around for years. The internet's ability to turn a 2-second gag into a viral meme, as happened with Chloe Grace Moretz, demonstrates how modern comedy can have unintended consequences. The show's approach to sensitive topics like disability, terminal illness, and personal tragedy also raises questions about whether any subject should be off-limits for satirical treatment. The Terry Schiavo episode particularly highlighted this tension, with critics arguing that some real-life situations are too painful and recent for comedic treatment, while others defend the right to satirize any public figure or event. From a psychological perspective, these celebrity reactions also reveal how public figures cope with being reduced to punchlines. Adrian Brody's continued resentment suggests that some people never fully recover from being mocked on such a large scale, especially when the jokes focus on physical characteristics they cannot change. Sarah Palin's fierce defense of her family shows how comedy can become deeply personal when it touches on sensitive family matters. The gender dynamics in some of these controversies are also worth examining. Rachel Bloom's observation about male condescension in comedy writing reflects broader conversations about how female creators and their work get treated in predominantly male-dominated comedy spaces. Her measured but critical response showed how women in entertainment often have to balance standing up for themselves while avoiding being labeled as humorless or overly sensitive. James Woods' evolution from enthusiastic participant to critic illustrates how political polarization can affect entertainment relationships. His willingness to mock himself disappeared when he felt the show's political perspective diverged too far from his own beliefs, suggesting that even self-deprecating humor has limits when it conflicts with personal values. The legal aspects, particularly Carol Burnett's lawsuit, highlight the complex intersection between parody rights and intellectual property protection. While courts generally protect satirical content under free speech provisions, celebrities still have legitimate concerns about how their likenesses and creations get used without permission, especially in commercial contexts. These stories also demonstrate the power dynamics between individual celebrities and large entertainment corporations. When Family Guy makes a joke, it has the backing of major networks and widespread distribution, while individual celebrities often have limited recourse beyond public statements or legal action. This imbalance can make satirical attacks feel particularly unfair to those being targeted. The Internet's role in amplifying these controversies cannot be overlooked. Social media platforms allow both celebrities to respond directly to perceived slights and fans to create additional content that extends the original jokes in unexpected directions. Chloe Grace Moretz's experience shows how online communities can take a television gag and transform it into something more personally damaging than the original creators intended. Looking at the long-term impact of these controversies, it's clear that some celebrities never fully recover their relationship with Family Guy or its fan base. Adrian Brody's continued resentment years later suggests that animated mockery can create lasting professional and personal damage. Other celebrities like Dax Shepard seem to have moved on more successfully by addressing the situation directly and maturely. The varying reactions also reflect different approaches to celebrity image management in the digital age. Some stars try to ignore satirical attacks, hoping they'll fade away naturally. Others engage directly, either through humor or criticism. Still others pursue legal remedies when they feel their rights have been violated. None of these approaches seems universally successful, suggesting that there's no perfect way to handle being satirized by popular media. These celebrity feuds with Family Guy ultimately reveal the complex relationship between comedy, fame, and personal dignity in contemporary entertainment. While satirical shows claim the right to mock public figures, those figures retain the right to respond, criticize, and seek legal remedies when they feel boundaries have been crossed. The ongoing debates about these controversies suggest that society is still figuring out the appropriate balance between comedic freedom and personal respect. As entertainment becomes more personalized and social media makes everyone more accessible, these questions will likely become even more complicated. Whether you think these celebrities were justified in their reactions or believe they should have just laughed it off, one thing is clear. Family Guy's willingness to target anyone and everyone has created a fascinating collection of bruised egos and public feuds that continues to spark conversation about the limits and responsibilities of satirical comedy. Want to dive deeper into Family Guy controversies and see why so many people are calling for the show to be canceled entirely? Check out our next video exploring the growing backlash against the series and whether all this controversy is finally catching up with Seth MacFarlane's creation. Ready to drift into the wonderfully chaotic world of Quahog? Tonight, we're diving deep into the most bizarre, hilarious, and oddly comforting Family Guy facts that'll have you sleeping soundly while laughing internally. From the Griffin family's darkest secrets to the most obscure trivia that even die-hard fans might miss, this is your ultimate bedtime companion for all things Family Guy. Let's start with something that might surprise you. Peter Griffin wasn't always meant to be the bumbling patriarch we know and love. The original concept had him as a more competent character, but as the show evolved, his stupidity became his defining trait. What's fascinating is how this intellectual decline actually mirrors real-world studies showing that prolonged exposure to certain environments can affect cognitive function. Peter's workplace at the brewery, his constant drinking, and his circle of equally dim friends created the perfect storm for his legendary ignorance. Speaking of Peter's proud intelligence, did you know his IQ has been tested multiple times throughout the series? While never explicitly stated, various episodes hint that it hovers somewhere between a goldfish and a particularly slow houseplant. The writers deliberately keep it vague because, as creator Seth MacFarlane once mentioned in interviews, giving Peter a specific IQ would limit the comedic possibilities. Sometimes he needs to be smart enough to operate heavy machinery. Other times he can't figure out how doorknobs work. The Griffin house itself holds secrets that most viewers never notice. The layout has mysteriously changed dozens of times throughout the series, with rooms appearing and disappearing like they're part of some supernatural phenomenon. The basement alone has been everything from a simple storage space to an elaborate laboratory, a nightclub, and even home to Peter's secret basement family. This isn't just inconsistent animation. It's actually become a running gag among the production team, who deliberately shift the house's internal geography to mess with detail-oriented fans. Here's something that'll make you appreciate Stewie even more. His distinctive British accent wasn't originally planned. Seth MacFarlane was experimenting with different voices during early development, and the posh British accent was meant to be temporary. However, when they recorded the first few episodes, the contrast between this sophisticated voice coming from a baby was so hilarious that they kept it. The accent also serves a deeper purpose, representing Stewie's intellectual superiority over his family, while simultaneously making his evil plots seem more theatrical than genuinely threatening. Brian Griffin represents one of television's most complex characters when you really think about it. He's an atheist in a predominantly Christian household, a failed writer in a family that doesn't value intellectual pursuits, and an alcoholic struggling with depression while maintaining a facade of being the voice of reason. The writers have used Brian to explore serious topics like addiction, mental health, and existential crisis, all while keeping the show fundamentally comedic. His relationship with Stewie works so well because they're both outsiders in their own family, bonded by their shared sense of not quite belonging. The show's animation style has evolved dramatically since its debut, but one thing that's remained consistent is the deliberate simplicity of character designs. This wasn't just a budget consideration. It was an artistic choice that allows for more fluid animation during the show's famous action sequences. Those epic Peter versus giant chicken fights require characters that can be drawn quickly and consistently by multiple animators, which is why everyone has such distinctive, simple silhouettes. Cleveland's departure and return to the show created one of the most interesting character arcs in animated television. When he left for his own spin-off, the writers had to figure out how to maintain the dynamic of Peter's friend group. Joe and Quagmire's personalities were subtly adjusted to fill the void Cleveland left behind. When Cleveland returned after his show was canceled, he was noticeably different, more cynical, and world-weary, reflecting both the character's experiences and perhaps the writer's own feelings about the failed spin-off. The show's time travel episodes aren't just random comedy. They're actually carefully constructed to avoid major paradoxes while still allowing for maximum chaos. Stewie's time machine has specific rules that the writers follow consistently, even when it's not explicitly stated. Time travelers can't prevent their own birth. Major historical events have a way of correcting themselves, and actions in the past create ripple effects rather than complete timeline rewrites. This attention to detail in such a seemingly chaotic show demonstrates the sophisticated writing behind the surface-level humor. Meg's treatment by her family has sparked countless discussions about bullying and family dynamics. What's interesting is that the writers have admitted they sometimes feel guilty about how harshly Meg is treated, leading to occasional episodes where she gets small victories or moments of genuine family connection. These episodes often perform better with audiences, suggesting that viewers appreciate depth even in characters who primarily exist for comic relief. The show's use of cutaway gags serves a purpose beyond just random humor. These flashbacks and fantasy sequences allow the writers to explore scenarios that would be impossible within the show's normal continuity. They're also used strategically to control pacing, breaking up dialogue-heavy scenes or extending episodes that might otherwise run short. Some of the most memorable Family Guy moments come from these seemingly throwaway gags, proving that sometimes the best comedy comes from complete non sequiturs. Lois Griffin's character represents an interesting study in maternal archetypes. She's simultaneously the long-suffering wife, the voice of reason, and occasionally the instigator of chaos. Her wealthy background provides constant opportunities for class-based humor, while her decision to marry Peter creates natural conflict with her family. The writers have explored her character depth through various episodes, showing her capacity for both nurturing and destruction, making her far more complex than the typical animated housewife. The show's musical numbers aren't just entertainment. They serve specific narrative functions. Songs are used to advance plot, develop character relationships, and provide emotional beats that straight dialogue might not achieve. The production team includes talented musicians who ensure these sequences feel authentic rather than forced. Some episodes are structured entirely around musical numbers, creating mini operettas within the traditional sitcom format. Family Guy's relationship with censorship has created some of the show's most creative moments. When standards and practices reject certain content, the writers often find more clever ways to address the same topics. This has led to some surprisingly sophisticated social commentary disguised as silly cartoon humor. The show's late-night time slot allows for more adult content, but the writers still push boundaries in ways that require careful navigation of network policies. The voice acting process for Family Guy is unique in animation. Seth MacFarlane voices multiple main characters, often having conversations with himself that require precise timing and distinct vocal characterizations. Recording sessions involve complex choreography as he switches between Peter, Brian, and Stewie, sometimes within single scenes. Other voice actors have adapted to this rhythm, creating an ensemble performance style that's rare in animation. The show's treatment of death and resurrection has become increasingly casual over the years. Characters have died and returned so often that mortality has lost much of its dramatic weight. This reflects both the show's cartoon logic and its approach to consequences. Actions that would be traumatic in real life become temporary inconveniences in the Family Guy universe, allowing for more extreme comedy without lasting emotional impact. Product placement and corporate references in Family Guy often serve dual purposes. While they sometimes represent genuine sponsorship deals, they're more often used for satirical commentary on consumer culture. The show frequently mocks the very brands it features, creating a complex relationship between commercial interests and creative expression. This balancing act reflects broader tensions in modern television production. The show's international versions reveal interesting cultural adaptations. Different countries handle the humor differently, sometimes replacing American-specific references with local equivalents. These translations offer insight into how comedy translates across cultural boundaries and what elements of Family Guy appeal to global audiences versus American-specific humor. Background characters in Family Guy often have surprisingly detailed backstories that never make it into episodes. The writers develop full histories for even minor characters, creating a rich fictional universe that extends beyond what viewers see. This attention to detail helps maintain consistency and provides material for potential future storylines, even if most of this information never becomes canonical. The show's handling of controversial topics has evolved significantly since its early seasons. What began as relatively straightforward shock humor has developed into more nuanced social commentary, though it still maintains its irreverent tone. The writers have learned to balance pushing boundaries with responsible storytelling, creating content that generates discussion rather than just controversy. Seth MacFarlane's musical background significantly influences the show's comedy style. His training in musical theater brings a sense of timing and rhythm to dialogue that's unusual in animated comedy. This musical sensibility affects everything from joke delivery to episode pacing, creating a unique comedic rhythm that distinguishes Family Guy from other animated series. The show's science fiction elements, particularly Stewie's inventions, follow surprisingly consistent internal logic. Time machines, mind control devices, and other fantastic technologies operate according to established rules within the show's universe. This consistency allows for complex storylines that span multiple episodes while maintaining the suspension of disbelief necessary for science fiction comedy. Family Guy's influence on internet culture extends far beyond simple memes. The show's rapid-fire reference style and cutaway structure mirror how information is consumed online, creating a feedback loop between the show and digital culture. Clips and quotes circulate independently of full episodes, creating new contexts and meanings for the show's content. The production schedule for Family Guy requires incredible coordination between writers, animators, voice actors, and musicians. Each episode involves hundreds of people working across multiple disciplines and locations. The complexity of this process is invisible to viewers, but represents a significant logistical achievement that enables the show's consistent quality and unique style. Character relationship dynamics in Family Guy follow specific patterns that create comedy through repetition and variation. Peter and Chicken's fights, Brian and Stewie's adventures, and Meg's rejection by her family operate like musical themes, with each iteration building on previous versions while introducing new elements. This structural approach to character interaction creates familiarity while maintaining surprise. The show's approach to aging is particularly interesting in animation. Characters remain physically the same while their experiences accumulate, creating personalities that develop without visual change. This allows for long-term character growth while maintaining the visual consistency that animation requires. The writers must balance character development with the static nature of animated characters. Family Guy's educational content is often hidden within comedy. Historical references, scientific concepts, and cultural knowledge are embedded in jokes and storylines, creating opportunities for learning disguised as entertainment. Viewers often gain information about topics they might not otherwise encounter, making the show inadvertently educational despite its primary focus on humor. The show's production team includes specialists in various fields who ensure accuracy in specialized content, medical procedures, legal situations, and technical details are researched to maintain believability even within the show's exaggerated reality. This attention to detail supports the show's ability to tackle complex topics while maintaining its comedic tone. Sound design in Family Guy extends beyond dialogue and music to create a rich auditory landscape. Background sounds, sound effects, and ambient noise contribute to the show's atmosphere and comedic timing. The production team uses audio to enhance visual gags and create emotional responses that support the storytelling. The show's merchandising strategy reflects its cultural impact and commercial success. Products range from simple apparel to complex collectibles, creating multiple revenue streams that support continued production. The variety of merchandise also demonstrates the show's broad appeal across different demographic groups and age ranges. Family Guy's influence on other animated shows is evident in the proliferation of adult-oriented animated comedy. The show's success paved the way for numerous imitators and inspired shows that push boundaries in different directions. This influence extends beyond animation to live-action comedy, creating a lasting impact on television humor. As we drift toward sleep, remember that Family Guy represents more than just animated comedy. It's a cultural phenomenon that reflects our society's humor, values, and contradictions. The Griffin family's chaos mirrors our own family dynamics. Their struggles echo our personal challenges, and their resilience reminds us that laughter can overcome almost anything. Whether you're dreaming of time travel adventures with Stewie, epic battles between Peter and a giant chicken, or simply the comfort of familiar voices telling familiar jokes, Family Guy continues to provide entertainment that's both sophisticated and silly, meaningful and meaningless, just like life itself. Sweet dreams, and remember, Somewhere in Quahog, the Griffin family is probably getting into another ridiculous situation that'll make you laugh tomorrow.